The gentle clink of glasses and bursts of laughter, mixed with smooth jazz on the rooftop terrace, painted a scene I'd grown to love during my 9 years with the company. The sunset bathed everything in a golden glow, making the city skyline look magical. My coworkers stood around, holding their champagne flutes, congratulating me on my new role. To Sandra, my best friend Kathleen cheered, her glass lifted high. From entry-level analyst to senior strategy director, you've earned this. A round of cheers followed, and I smiled, feeling my heart swell with pride. This promotion was more than a new job title. It was proof that all those long nights, missed birthdays, and weekends spent working instead of living had finally paid off. I scanned the crowd, my gaze meeting Matthews, the boss who once believed in me. He raised his glass too, but his smile was tight and didn't reach his eyes. Then, just as quickly, he looked away. Lately, Matthew had been different. The man who used to guide and encourage me had become cold and distant, barely speaking to me unless necessary. At first, I thought he was just stressed, especially given the company's recent struggles. But in my gut, I sensed it was something deeper. Still, I was determined not to let Matthew's strange mood steal my happiness. Tonight was my night, or so I thought. As I set my glass down, ready to accept another round of congratulations, Matthew stepped into the center of the terrace. He tapped his spoon against his glass, drawing everyone's attention. The laughter faded. For a moment, there was only silence, heavy and expectant. I felt a nervous flutter in my stomach. Then Matthew looked right at me, his words sharp and deliberate. "Sandra, you've had your celebration," he announced, a sly smile on his lips. "Now it's time to say goodbye. Your position is being terminated. Effective Friday." A wave of shock passed through the crowd. Some gasped, others just stared. I couldn't move or speak. Matthew wasn't finished. "We're restructuring," he continued. "Your responsibilities will be split among the leadership team. It's nothing personal, just business. I wanted to give you a proper send-off." He lifted his glass as if to toast my exit. The music played on, but the joy in the air had vanished. I looked around. Colleagues stood frozen, some looking away, not sure what to do. Kathleen's face was pale with disbelief. Maybe I should have cried or shouted or demanded an explanation. But instead, I just smiled. "No problem," I said quietly. Matthews seemed surprised, almost disappointed, as if he'd expected me to beg or break down in front of everyone. But I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. "Friday then," I added. "I'll be out by the end of the day." Calmly, I picked up my glass and took one last sip of champagne. The night fell apart after that. People left early, some whispering apologies, others simply disappearing. Matthew vanished too. But I stayed, sitting beneath the string lights as the staff cleared away the last plates. What no one at that party knew, not even Matthew, was that I'd seen this coming. Weeks before, I'd overheard a late-night conversation in the office. Matthew didn't know I was still working in the next room when he whispered on the phone about phasing her out and how optics mattered. I'd been ready for this moment, even if it still hurt. Matthew thought he was clever, planning to let me enjoy the party before showing me the door. What he didn't realize was that I'd already made my quiet moves, careful and smart. So, when he announced that Friday would be my last day, I wasn't shocked. I knew it was coming, and more importantly, I already knew what I was going to do. This wasn't just about losing a job. It was about respect, about being betrayed and pushed aside when you're no longer useful. People like Matthew always underestimate the quiet ones. He didn't know it yet, but by the time Friday arrived, his plan would already be too late. The next morning, I stepped out of the elevator onto my office floor. It was Thursday, with just one more day left. The hall felt tense. Some coworkers avoided my eyes as I walked by. Others looked at me with awkward sympathy, not sure what to say. I didn't blame them. This company was built on silence, not on loyalty or honesty, just following orders and never making waves. That's how Matthew kept his power. He didn't need to be liked, just feared. I sat at my desk and turned on my computer. My inbox was full of HR forms, calendar updates, and transition documents, cold and impersonal, a digital goodbye. I handled each file calmly, checking and filing them away. Then I opened my drive. Hidden inside a secure folder was everything I'd been collecting over the last 4 months, a detailed record of Matthew's questionable financial activities at the company. To be clear, I hadn't started searching for dirt out of spite. I found it by accident late one night, working on the budget for our Thailand expansion. Some of Matthew's adjustments looked odd, large amounts of money being moved around through shell companies that didn't add up. It was careless, and I couldn't ignore it. The next day, I asked Matthew about it. He brushed me off, saying it was just streamlining expenses, and told me not to worry. But I did worry. I recognized that tone, the one that shut down questions because he thought I wouldn't understand. So, I began quietly saving files, building a timeline, and checking every detail. I matched invoices, traced payments, and even found one vendor registered with a frozen yogurt shop in North Dakota. It didn't take long to realize what was happening. Matthew was funneling money through fake vendors, inflating costs, and skimming company funds. It was subtle, something only someone deep in the project would catch. Someone like me. I didn't confront Matthew right away. Instead, I talked to a lawyer, a sharp whistleblower attorney named Evelyn, recommended by a friend from grad school. She told me exactly what to do. Document everything, keep a clear trail, and don't let anyone know until I was ready. I followed her advice. I built a detailed file, timestamped every piece of evidence, and made 5 copies, one on a secure cloud, one printed and sealed in an envelope, and one on a USB stick I always kept in my bag. So, when Matthew made his big announcement at my farewell party, trying to humiliate me, he had no idea I was already prepared. He thought he was in control, but the truth was I already held the real power. At lunch, I crossed the street to a little coffee shop I used to visit before late nights at work had stolen my free time. Kathleen was already there, waiting for me at a corner table, her face tense with worry. I still couldn't wrap my head around what he'd done. She barely touched her sandwich as she spoke, her voice a mix of disbelief and concern. He embarrassed you in front of everyone like you were just a temp who made a silly mistake. I stirred my coffee slowly. Matthew's never been subtle. He wanted it to hurt. She looked at me, searching my face. Why didn't you say anything? You just smiled. That's what threw him off, I replied, allowing myself a faint smile. Silence makes people like Matthew nervous. Outrage is easy to fight, but calm? That unsettles them. She gave me a curious look. You're planning something, aren't you? I tried to sound innocent. I'm just getting ready to leave, making sure everything is in order. She raised an eyebrow. Should I be worried? I glanced out the window. Probably not, but you'll find out soon enough. After lunch, I went back to the office and printed out a spotless transition report. I made sure it had everything, project statuses, important contacts, passwords, anything they would need to keep things running after I left. It was a neat package, almost like a parting gift, but really, it was for contrast. When everything fell apart, I wanted it to be obvious that I'd done everything right. No loose ends. No mistakes. They chose to humiliate me, even after I left them with nothing to criticize. That afternoon, I got an email from HR, a calendar invite for my final exit interview. Friday at 3 p.m., as if they were deleting me from the system with a single click. But what they didn't know was that by 2:35 p.m. on Friday, the system itself would be in question. Matthew wanted to clean the house. I had chosen to set it on fire, and my plan was already in motion. Friday morning felt strange, like a storm was building, even though the sky was clear. I dressed with care. A black blazer, simple gold earrings, a deep blue blouse, the color I always wore when I needed to feel calm. The elevator ride to the 23rd floor felt longer than ever, even though I'd done it countless times. But this time, I wasn't just showing up for work. I was here to finish what I'd started. When I walked into the office, the atmosphere was tense. People offered me polite nods or half-hearted smiles, but everyone could sense something was off. Since the party, rumors had been flying, but nobody knew the full story. Even Matthew had gone quiet, hiding in his office and communicating only through his assistant. By 8 a.m., I was at my desk, calmly tying up the last threads. The transition file was ready and bound. The USB drive with all the financial data was tucked safely in my purse. And in my top drawer sat a sealed envelope addressed to the board's ethics committee, containing a full report on Matthew's misconduct. Everything was ready. At 8:20 a.m., the first sign appeared. Matthew stormed out of his office and slammed the door so hard it echoed across the floor. His face was red, his jaw clenched. He barked at his assistant before disappearing down the stairwell. I didn't have to ask what happened. I already knew. Just 14 minutes earlier, the board had received an anonymous email packed with details, names, dates, wire transfers, proof. The kind of evidence no one could ignore. The kind that had come from me, sent securely, impossible to trace back to my work account. As a final note, I ended my report with a simple message. I trust the board will know what to do with this information before the legal authorities need to get involved. It was a gentle warning, enough to keep things inside the company, but strong enough to make them nervous. By 9:05 a.m., the company's main lawyer had arrived. Her name was Anna, and I'd only met her twice in all my years there. She didn't handle the usual problems. She came when there was a real crisis. Matthew hadn't expected a crisis today. Around 10:14 a.m., HR called me in for a quick check-in meeting, much earlier than my scheduled exit interview. Patricia from HR tried to smile as I came in, but her hands were tightly folded in front of her. "Thank you for coming in, Sandra. We just wanted to see how you're doing, with everything going on." "I'm fine," I said calmly, folding my hands on my lap. "It's been a productive week." She shifted in her seat, looking uneasy. "We want to make sure you're not leaving with the wrong idea. The decision to end your role was just part of a bigger restructuring." "Of course," I replied in a neutral, businesslike tone. Her smile faded a little. There was a new look in her eyes. Not kindness, not sympathy, but caution. She could sense that something bigger was happening, even if she didn't know the details. HR always felt when trouble was coming, but they never knew exactly where it would hit. I didn't show them anything. I stayed polite, cooperative, and professional. That's what made them even more nervous. By noon, I was back at my desk. Matthew hadn't been seen for over an hour. His office was dark, his assistant was gone, and people started sending quiet messages. Did Matthew get called into a board meeting? Why is legal here? Something's happening. They were right. At 11:30 p.m., I got a text from an unknown number. "We received your report. Please do not leave the building before speaking with our committee representative. Board Compliance Office." I stared at the screen for a moment and then put my phone away. They had my report. The process had started. At 1:50 p.m., I walked toward the conference room for my exit interview, the same one Matthew had smugly set up for me. But this time, Matthew wasn't there. When I opened the door, Patricia was waiting, but she wasn't smiling. Beside her sat a tall man in a gray suit, serious and silent. "Sandra," he said, standing up. "I'm Brian Anderson, internal counsel for the board. I'd like to ask you a few questions before we complete your departure paperwork." "Of course," I said smoothly, taking my seat. "I'm happy to answer anything you need." He didn't bother with small talk. He opened a folder and pulled out a printed page. It was one of my documents, marked confidential, with a clear timestamp. The room was so quiet, I could hear the clock ticking behind me. The real meeting was starting. Brian looked at me seriously. "We've reviewed your report. What you provided is detailed and thorough." I nodded. It needed to be. Patricia from HR sat stiffly, her hands tight in her lap. This was no longer a simple exit interview. This was about the law, and she knew it. Brian continued, "Several of the financial documents you sent show possible serious violations. Some could even be considered fraud if they're proven true. They're already verified," I said calmly. "Check the audit trail in our internal system. Everything I sent is timestamped and recorded. Those files aren't my opinion. They're the company's records." He looked at me for a long moment. I met his gaze without looking away. "What do you want from this, Sandra?" he finally asked. "I don't want anything," I replied, folding my hands on the table. "I'm leaving today as planned. I didn't want to ruin the company or make a big scene in the media. Brian looked at me and asked, "Then why did you send all this in?" I answered, "Because if I didn't, no one would. People like Matthew shouldn't be able to ruin careers just for fun and walk away with no consequences." There was a long pause. Finally, Brian nodded and closed his folder. "We appreciate your honesty and your decision to keep this quiet," he said. "The board is starting an emergency investigation right now. Matthew's access to company funds is frozen, and we're running a full audit. We may have more questions for you in the coming weeks." I picked up my bag and stood. "You know where to find me," I said. I left the conference room calmly, just as I had entered. But this time, I wasn't just someone being let go. I was the one who opened the door and let the truth out. By 3 p.m., people were no longer whispering. Someone from accounting said Matthew had been quietly taken out of the building, not by security, but through the parking garage, pretending it was a personal emergency. But everyone knew it wasn't personal. It was official. The executive floor was locked down. Legal teams were searching Matthew's office, checking emails, and collecting company devices. Staff buzzed with questions. What happened? Did Matthew finally get caught? Is that why Sandra seemed so calm all week? I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. People started to put the pieces together themselves. The way Matthew embarrassed me at the party, how I hadn't reacted, how I kept showing up every day with a calm smile. At 3:40 p.m., Kathleen came to sit beside me at the office cafe, eyes wide. "Matthew's gone," she whispered. Like, gone. They're cleaning out his email. Nobody is saying anything but, "I know," I said softly. She stared at me. "Wait, you knew?" I nodded. Her mouth fell open. "Oh my God, Sandra, what did you do?" I just gave her a small smile. I told the truth. At 4:05 p.m., I packed my things. Not in a cardboard box, just my regular work bag. No drama, no big goodbye. I took a quiet walk to the elevator. As the doors were about to close, someone called my name. It was Anna, the company's top lawyer. She stepped in beside me, holding a folder. "I wanted to catch you before you left," she said. "The board is meeting late tonight. We're starting a formal investigation into Matthew's actions. What you reported will probably need to be sent to government authorities." I stayed silent. She handed me the folder. "This is a formal notice that you're protected as a whistleblower," she explained. "No one can retaliate against you. Even though you're leaving, if you ever want to come back." "Thank you," I said, putting a folder in my bag. "But I think I've already outgrown this place." She smiled. "You probably have." When the elevator opened, I stepped out into the cool evening air and glanced back at the glass tower behind me, the place where I'd spent 9 years, giving my best. The place that tried to bury me with a smile and a party. But I realized I hadn't been buried. I'd been planted. And now, the truth was starting to break through the surface. By Monday morning, the news had spread everywhere. Just after 8 a.m., a story popped up in the financial news. Internal investigation launched into executive misconduct at Brookridge and Company. They didn't name Matthew, but anyone who worked there knew. But for those of us who had worked at the company, we didn't need names. The words in the article said enough. Unauthorized financial activity. Whistleblower report. Board-initiated audit. Senior executive, placed on leave. The article was short and factual, but it made a big impact. Inside the office, everything felt different. Suddenly, people who had said nothing when Matthew fired me were now buzzing with excitement. Slack channels were exploding with rumors. Office gossip turned into real discussions. And my name kept coming up. Everyone wanted to know what I'd done. I wasn't there, of course. My contract had ended on Friday. I was no longer an employee, but that didn't mean I was forgotten. By noon, 5 people from the office had messaged me on LinkedIn. These were people who had once whispered in the hallways, now finding their voices. "I wish I'd stood up for you sooner. What you did was brave. If you're planning anything new, I want in. I'm done staying quiet. You gave me the push I needed to leave too. Thank you." But one message stood out. It was from Laura, someone I barely knew from another department. "Sandra, you don't know me, but I worked under Matthew for 6 years. He took credit for my work so many times I lost count. I thought I was imagining things. I thought maybe I was just crazy. But what you did gave me proof I wasn't. Thank you. I stared at her message for a long time. Then I replied, "You're not crazy. You were just in the wrong system. Keep going." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about me. It was about everyone who had been ignored, silenced, or made to feel invisible, people who just wanted to do good work but weren't treated fairly. Now, the company was falling apart. By Tuesday, the board sent out a memo admitting to big mistakes in financial oversight. This time, they said Matthew's name. He was officially fired, terminated, not resigned. That word made all the difference. Later, Kathleen called me, sounding shocked. "They're changing everything," she said. "New policies, new reviews for expenses, mandatory ethics training. They've even hired an outside firm to check all contracts." "Sounds like damage control," I said, walking around my apartment. "It is," she replied, "but it's real. People are finally speaking up. For once, they're scared." I didn't say it out loud, but I felt it inside. The system was finally cracking, and I had been the first to swing the hammer. The best part? I wasn't even done yet. While Brookridge and company was struggling with the fallout, I was already talking to 4 other companies. They had all seen the news. They were impressed with how I had handled myself. One firm stood out, a growing consultancy called Veritas Partners. The CEO, Heather, reached out for a meeting. I read between the lines. She told me on Zoom, "You stayed professional and never made it about revenge." That's rare. I wasn't looking for revenge, I said. I wanted accountability. There's a difference. She smiled. That's exactly what we want here. We're building a leadership program for women in strategy roles. I want you to help lead it. By Thursday, I'd signed a new contract with Veritas Partners. Better pay, a higher title, and a real leadership position. They gave me a private office, a voice at the table, and a platform to create real change. But the best moment came that Friday, exactly 1 week after my so-called promotion party. That morning, Brookridge and company released a public statement. "We acknowledge the valuable contributions of Sandra Smith during her time here. Her commitment to ethical standards and accountability has inspired significant changes we are committed to continuing." It wasn't much. It wasn't close to what they owed me, but it was a start. Now it was public, and for the first time, the company said my name with respect. That meant more to me than I expected. That afternoon, I stood in my new office with a real mug of tea, looking out at the city and smiling. I realized some stories don't end with the villain losing. Sometimes, the real story starts when you tell the truth and build something better. 2 months later, I spoke at a Women in Leadership event. My name was on the agenda as a whistleblower and a new partner at Veritas. I told the crowd, I was fired the same night I was celebrated. I explained how I stood up, not for revenge, but for accountability. The applause was real. Many in the room had felt the same way. After my speech, a young woman thanked me. She said, "You gave me the courage to speak up." I told her, "You're not alone. Know your worth." That night, my new boss Heather told me, Brookridge's board called. They want help fixing their company. I just smiled. Real change was finally starting. I spoke calmly, finally understanding how much my actions had changed things. "I'll meet with them," I said to Heather, "but only if they put it in writing that they silenced people, not just me, but everyone Matthew pushed down. I want real change, not just words." Heather smiled. "I thought you'd say that." Sitting in my new office with the city lights outside, I paused to reflect. I wasn't the same woman who started at Brookridge 9 years ago, desperate to impress someone who never valued me. I wasn't fighting for a place at someone else's table anymore. I had built my own. In the end, Matthew became the warning story, not me. He showed others how not to lead, while I showed what happens when you refuse to be quiet. The truth is, not everyone is loud. Some victories are quiet, found in documents, in staying strong, and in being recognized for who you are. The most powerful revenge is realizing you were never the problem, the system was. Your voice matters, even if it shakes. Speaking up doesn't make you difficult. It makes you powerful to those who fear the truth. And that's a story worth sharing always.